Now, I had a colleague at the time who was raving on about this ketogenic diet, and honestly, it was just red flags. I'm like, no hell, no way am I doing this high fat, low carb diet. Number one, I cannot give up my carbohydrates. That's just, it's a non-negotiable. And number two, you know, my, I guess, traditional sense of healthcare, my red flags were kicking in my brain saying, don't do this. You're gonna just skyrocket your cholesterol. Like, okay. Uh, I'll look into it anyway because this colleague of mine, he was so persistent. And he sounded so passionate about it. He sent me through a documentary by Dr. Robert Lustig. It was Sugar the Bitter Truth. That
Yep.
changed that opened my eyes a lot.
We're bringing healthy back. Them other bros don't know about the facts.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast, episode 23, where optimized metabolic health is our goal, and we are here to get you there. My name is Amelia Wood, and I am a food-first personal trainer and metabolic health coach. Of course, my co-host, Dr. Fumi, the hospitalist, she wishes she could be here, but she is out of the studio today. However, we have a very special guest, Jofferson. I forgot to ask you how to say your last name. Is it
Oh,
Ylade?
Ilarde. Ilarde.
Ylade.
Yes.
So you say all the letters.
Yes, I did.
Got it.
Yeah.
Ylade. So hi, Joff. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Amelia, and also to Dr. Funmi for having me on the podcast. It's an honor.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to learn more about you. I'll start with your bio so folks can get to know you a bit. So, Jofferson is a Primal Health Coach who studied through the Primal Health Coach Institute in 2023-2024. He is a registered nurse and earned his Bachelor's of Nursing in 2011, plus a graduate certificate in rehabilitation nursing specialty in 2018. He is a healthcare worker. However, his own health was failing despite his education. Over the years since becoming a registered nurse, he served to help others through healthcare, not realizing that he too was in need of help. In 2020, he hit rock bottom and was obese, had worsening cardiovascular disease symptoms, chronic joint pain, low energy, anxiety, depression, and ongoing flare-ups of eczema. He tried everything from yo-yo dieting, training harder in the gym, eating less, calorie counting, supplements, and medications. Nothing worked until 3 years ago he came across the concept of ketogenic and carnivore diets and decided to give it a go. And we're going to hear all about it today. Okay, so, one thing I didn't share with you directly, and I like to share with all of our listeners every time so people know why we're here, is that here at the Magic of Metabolic Health podcast, we are building a true village that encompasses every part of who you are. We release guilt and shame in the quest for perfection and show you how self-efficacy and knowing your why are crucial tools in sustainable behavior change and optimizing your metabolic health. So let's get started. All right. So, Joff, first of all, tell us where you are because you're in this brightly lit room, but no one would probably guess where exactly you are on the planet. Where are you?
Yeah. Well, so I am based here in Brisbane, Australia, so the east coast of Australia. So right now it's, bright and early in the morning, and where you are in the world, in the US, it's, in the evening. So this is very interesting sort of a collaboration with time zones, but we made it work.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the love part of technology that I
Yeah.
appreciate, right? That we can do this. And
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about how we met and we're like, I don't know, the internet,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is apparently no longer creepy. It's very
No.
normal. You meet really fabulous humans online, usually in social media circumstances. So we decided, Joff and I decided that we're going to make memories today, lasting memories through our first conversation together besides just some messaging back and forth.
Yeah.
And so you're in Australia. Lovely. Never been there. It's on my bucket list. Definitely will come to
Mm-hmm.
visit. And so we always start with this one question with our guests because we're the magic of metabolic health, right? So if we want to know where we're going, we have to know where we've been, right? So what kind of food did you eat as a child, and what were your family's values around food growing up?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. So, food as a child, I grew up, so my ethnicity, I'm Filipino, so my values were based around the Filipino culture, which is heavily uh, influenced by obviously food. Food was a huge part. I think food is a huge part. Food is a huge part in any culture, but in particular with the Filipino culture, um, and along other Asian countries, rice is a huge staple in the diet. So I always grew up eating rice as a staple source of, the diet. And being in the tropical climates, the the other things that I did eat growing up were a lot of fruits. Um, I won't say too much of the vegetables, but definitely fruits. And I did eat a bit of meat as well. So it was a very I guess you would say a mixed macronutrient diet, a standard Asian diet, I guess. And food was a huge part of growing up, especially, I guess I would say being brought up in a household that already knew metabolic health at a young, early on in my life because of the people around me. So I've got a huge family history of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and I knew those words at a very young age. My grandfather had a stroke, so I knew what a stroke was. My grandfather had type 2 diabetes. Um, my family around me, the elders, my aunties, uncles, they were all suffering from these metabolic problems. And so I knew those key words at such a young age. And yeah, so that awareness was set in motion quite early, but I was never able to piece together I guess, the reasons why we were unhealthy, and not until later on in life. So that was my general upbringing. And of course, being so carb dominant in my household with fruits and rice, um, and also I'll throw in there the ultra processed foods. Um, I had a sweet tooth growing up, and I didn't know it until now, but I did use food for not just fuel, but to it was associated with emotions. And I guess to cut it short, people label it nowadays as sugar addiction or food addiction. I think I definitely um, started off at a young age being attached to food for many reasons, and that trickled down to my teenage years and to my early adulthood. Yeah, so sugar addiction
Yeah.
or food addiction was a huge part of my life. Yeah.
How do you think the role of tradition played into those sweet tooth cravings? Because for me, I grew up, every holiday was an opportunity to have something sweet, right? And honestly, every day, like dessert
Yeah.
after dinner, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of folks struggle with the holidays and celebrations and
Yeah.
even like spiritual traditions when there's a holiday that's sacred and you always have X or this because it's tradition and it's related to the value of the religion or the spirituality. How did that influence you, do you think, or your family growing up?
Yeah. Well, um, Definitely. I mean, so my background as well with my religion is Christianity. So I was a Christian growing up, Catholic, and we had all the celebrations. Uh, your Easter celebrations, Christmas, and on top of that, we had big families. So the birthdays, it was almost every couple of weeks there was a
Yeah.
birthday, and it was a celebration. And with Filipinos, they don't hold back when it comes to meal prep or having parties. They go all in, and it's a huge feast every single time. And so the food would be cooked in bulk and would always have leftovers. That was the thing growing up. I grew up eating a lot of leftover food, from parties, and so that that was a huge part of culture that was associated to me eating the way I did. Um, I'm gonna go throw another one in there, but school. I think the early years of school, and on top of the holidays and the occasions that we just mentioned during school. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, but they had little mini, I guess, things that were a part of just that's what we did in school. So things like I don't know if you guys did it in the US, but we used to do fundraisers as kids, and we used to have a box of chocolates. I can't remember what time of the year it was, but it was always something that we used to do was we'd raise money, we'd go to our go around door knocking, selling chocolates to
Yep.
our
Us
neighbors.
too.
Um, but yeah, as a kid, we never got to that point of actually going to door knocking. It was we'd always finish the chocolates and get our parents to pay for it. So that was a huge part of growing up too, was, looking forward to getting the box of chocolates that you had to go and uh, sell and fundraise for. But you know,
So
that's
you
where
were
I
you
yeah,
were savvy back then, a young
yeah, yeah.
businessman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it just became so common. That was just such a normal thing. So I think that became, I guess, culture.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
to to yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I can relate to that. Selling, bake sales were really popular when I was
yeah,
little. And it would be not just for the school, it would be for your team sport or choir
yeah,
or band or anything, right? And so there was always an opportunity. I mean, there's cookies here in the US. I won't name names, but there's a
yeah,
big organization that sells cookies, and everybody loves those cookies, and they're so hard to resist because, well, it's for a good cause, right? So we could go down the rabbit hole of changing the culture of fundraising and entrepreneurship for children and all that stuff. But um, I I I want to kind of keep going forward into your life, and then we might jump back into cultural traditions later, because I definitely want to talk to you about modifications and alternatives, because things still happen. Christmas still happens, Easter still happens, and we can't just ignore it. But maybe later we can jump back into that. So you're growing up, you had lots of celebrations, lots of food centered parties, lots of leftovers. You saw your family suffering. Maybe you didn't know exactly from what or why or how, but I wonder what inspired you to become a nurse. Was it the family stuff specifically, like you wanted to know how to fix your family, or was it a bit different than that?
absolutely. So I think that definitely played a huge role in it. The decision to become a nurse was inspired from my family. So a lot of I had a lot of I have a lot of relatives that are healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, a lot of nurses actually. But it was my mother. who wasn't a nurse, but wanted to, have someone who was, to carry on that sort of, I guess, tradition of having healthcare professionals in the family. And so, she, I tried to go down the route of, well, I did want to become a doctor growing, as a kid, but, I was, stuck in that decision later on in life. I didn't actually want to become a nurse initially, but it did fascinate me to know that, I could be helping people out there, um, and also learning more about these issues that my family was struggling with. So it did play a huge role into that. But I think so. I went straight out of the gates into high school. I decided to study my bachelor's of nursing, and that's where everything sort of kicked into gear with learning more about these keywords that I understood at a young age. So, I got to learn about strokes, diabetes, and heart disease through my studies, and coincidentally, that's when my own health issues started to, surface, or I guess awareness of my health issues. It was the first year of my undergraduate degree where we had to get blood tests done before going out into what we call clinical placements, which was, student nurses practicing in the hospitals. And with that blood test, they had to check on things like, your immunity towards contactable diseases, but it was also a general blood panel. So I was surprised that I got a call from the doctors saying, "You've got to come in. This has nothing to do with um, your immunity results. This is about your other blood panels that we were looking at." So keep in mind, I'm 17 at this time. I was 17
You were
years
only
old.
17.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Wow.
only 17. So I I came in not knowing what the discussion was going to be about, but the doctors said that I had high cholesterol. And so I already knew what that was because, I've just been studying cholesterol in, I believe it was pharmacology, at that time. That was a pharmacology class. And I knew about cholesterol lowering tablets. So it was fresh off my mind. And so the doctors, I thought that it can't be that bad. I'm 17 years old. And the doctors told me that, well, you've got your family history of heart disease, strokes, diabetes. So it's nothing to take lightly. And so he proceeded to talk about options. Of course, being so young, he said, look, diet and lifestyle are going to be the most least invasive. And he did also say that that's what you should be working on regardless is diet and lifestyle. But he also mentioned the use of statins or cholesterol lowering medications.
For a 17-year-old.
For a 17-year-old, yes, yes. So that shocked me, and that sort of sent tingles in my brain, like, oh, I've really got to do something about this. If you're talking about taking medications, all right, well, let's get into this diet and lifestyle because I'm definitely not taking a statin at 17. Um, and so he sent me off to, with a referral to see a dietitian.
Can I ask
He
you a
recommended,
question
yeah,
about the
yeah, yeah,
cholesterol? So, a lot of times people who have an untrained eye, let's say,
yeah.
about metabolic blood tests and panels, they hear, "Oh, you have high cholesterol," and then that's it. The doctor doesn't always explain which cholesterol is high. Did your doctor tell you? And did you know, since you were in nursing, to ask, well, which one is it, doc? How did that go?
So my memory is a little bit faded with this. I don't recall him ever explaining the results, the other you know lipid particles in the panel. But my auntie, who is a nurse, she did interpret it for me, and she did tell me which, what to look at, which one was the good cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, the triglycerides, and whatnot. So she did go through the panel with me. The main concern was the total cholesterol and the LDL, which was the bad cholesterol. And so that's when uh, that's where the clarification was. But in that moment, I think I was more shocked at the fact that he mentioned taking statins, and I didn't. At 17, you don't really ask the questions. You just, I'm doing it, doc. Whatever you say, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. Yeah,
So
yeah.
do you mind if I ask what year this was, just so we can have a
This
point of reference for how long statins had been around? And
this is 2009. 2009. Yeah, it's not
2009,
that long
that's
ago. Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
now.
It's nothing.
Okay. It's not like it
2009.
was in 84 when statins came
No,
out.
no,
Not that you would
no,
pass for however old that is, but no.
no. No, definitely not. But I did know about statins because my family were taking,
Hmm.
the statins, and I did have a family member who worked in GP clinics. So you know, I'm not going to say the brands, but it was very prominent, and would have boxes and boxes of these cholesterol-lowering tablets at home.
Right.
So yeah, I knew all about it.
Okay, so geez, that must have been scary. It must have been
Mm.
intimidating. So so you I've been, following you on social media and trying to
Hmm.
educate myself a bit about what you do now, but one of the things that you're very open about is your story of transformation. So you're 17 and you get this diagnosis. How did your metabolic health continue after that diagnosis? Did it take a few years for you to make positive changes, or was it like pretty immediate and then you saw the results and it was great? Like, because everybody has ups and downs, right? It's never just, I hate to say it, there's no magic pill, but
Yes.
there are certain lifestyle changes we can make. So I'm curious if you want to share about briefly, that journey of the initial diagnosis and how it went from there.
Yeah, yeah. I could definitely take you through the waves and the ebbs and the flows, but in the nutshell, that kicked off, I guess the awareness and the urgency to do something about it. So I was very, very much, I was health conscious as a child. Now I'm actively going to do something about it. Um, like I said, I went down the route of seeking help from the professionals that the GP had recommended, seeing a dietitian. I signed up to a gym, which ended up being a huge part of my life. I absolutely fell in love with exercise, and that I attribute to a lot of my health improvements. And I did improve a lot, I think, because of exercise and going to the gym. However, the diet side of things, I found it a lot harder to maintain purely because maybe, sorry, I shouldn't say purely. I think it was largely to do with being a massive food addict and a massive carb lover. I love sugar. And
And
so,
can I
yeah,
tune in here as
yeah,
like a
yeah.
metabolic health coach and personal trainer? Is I want to also give credit where credit's due, unfortunately, to your environment, to remember that although maybe you've struggled with processed food addiction, the reason you struggled with it is because it was everywhere, all around you,
Yes.
all the time. So I just want to, mention that for folks who are listening, because
Mhm.
a lot of times there's a stigma attached to bigger body people or, food addicted people, whatever you want to call it, like, well, it's your choice, just like being an alcoholic is your choice.
Hmm.
And if you wanted to stop, you could just stop. But food, I feel, is at this point in my life and in my career, food is even harder to get a healthy relationship with, because you don't just have food at a party. You eat food multiple times a day, because if you don't, you die. So quitting the processed food is a lot harder for some people than just quitting alcohol or quitting smoking. So I just wanted to throw that in there, as like, I praise you for acknowledging the addiction, and I wanted to acknowledge, your food environment sounded, pretty intense for, I
Thank
mean,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. That you've really, I really like that. I like that how you've mentioned and you know, I love it when people talk about the environment, because it does play a huge part. And it does. It really did. Um, I can nitpick on all the little things that were in my environment that were, just where I was at the time. There would always be carbohydrates and processed foods. And when I talk about carbohydrates, I'm really talking about heavily processed foods and junk food, really. It was everywhere. And yeah, so the fitness journey started. The diet was up and down, and that's where I struggled the most, was with diet, because now that I look back, the fitness industry, and I hate to be blunt about this, but I will, because I do think it needs to be pointed out. But I do think that the fitness industry enable a lot of the food habits that a lot of people have. I'm just
I
gonna
agree.
I'm just gonna highlight, and I don't know how far you want to get to this, but the whole notion of being in a calorie deficit and always, stick and yeah, this is it. I've opened up a can of
I
worms, and
know,
I'll try to keep it
it's a
stuck
can
here.
of
Yeah,
worms. And
yeah,
so I tend to always bring up the opposite, right? So
yes,
you talked about calorie deficit. One thing as a personal trainer that I've been exposed to is this concept of eating extra calories or extra carbohydrates because you're trying to build muscle, or you're going to run a marathon,
yes,
or
yeah,
whatever. Like, especially kids who play sports in high school, they're allowed to eat anything because
yeah,
they're burning calories all the time and they're putting wear and tear on their bodies. But as a metabolic health coach and a food first personal trainer, I would never say that to anyone, no matter what they look like, no matter what
yeah,
sport they play. There's nuance to it. And sure, the calories in, calories out thing, we can table that, put a pin in that, but both matter, I think. If we're saying that it's okay to cut calories, and we're also saying it's okay to carb load or calorie load, um, there's a problem with that, because you have to understand the context, right?
hmm,
Just because I run 10 miles a day doesn't save me from having complications metabolically, right? If
mm,
I'm carb loading and drinking those syrups or jellies or
yeah,
jams,
yeah,
when you're racing and stuff like that. So anyway, again, can of worms, but
yeah, yeah. But look, that was definitely that was a huge, uh, I guess that got me stuck. It really did get me stuck in this cycle of binge eating. You know, and so moving on from that, I looked great. I felt like I looked really good, and I was doing very well with my fitness, and I was sort of chasing my tail around every time I would slip up with the diet. It was always, I'll just work out, I'll train harder, I'll push myself, and it worked. I'm not gonna lie, it did work for the time being. As a 20 year old, was 17 up to my 20s, it worked. It was, I couldn't see past what the mirror and the performance was telling me. So the reality check came when I would go to the doctors and they would take assessments. They would do the same, get the blood tests, check the blood pressure, and that's when reality hits. Hey, Joff, your cholesterol remains high. Your LDL is still high. Your blood pressure is slightly elevated. And so, it would be okay, let's get back into dieting harder, eat less, move more, because that's all I knew. Um, and so your body can only go so far physically, but also mentally. So I think this went on backwards and forwards to the doctors to try and, see if blood tests and blood pressure would improve. But every year it was the same results. My cholesterol, I don't think I've ever been below the recommended ranges.
Mhm.
I don't ever remember my blood pressure being below 130, 140. I had
As a young adult.
hypertension as a young adult, yeah,
Yeah.
in my early 20s. And so, you get to a point, this is where the mental fatigue kicks in. Well, why bother with what's not working? Obviously, I've been trying these diets, and I can't seem to stick to it. I'm doing, I'm doing the intermittent fasting. I'm tracking my calories. I'm eating below, I'm trying to stick to a calorie deficit, but I feel terrible. And so then I go into a relapse. So I'm like, okay, well, let's just, you know, I don't know whether it was just out of pure frustration, but I decided to just say, nope, I'm just gonna go and focus on fitness. I and that was it. And I let my diet go. And that's when I guess things started to go downhill. And I'm talking about probably in my mid 20s towards my late 30s. That's when it really started to affect that's when I really started to let my diet go. And it didn't take long until physically it caught up. Of course I put on more weight. Um, I just let myself loose. I focused on, just being strong. I competed in a sport called powerlifting, so it was all just about lifting heavy. And I didn't worry about weight classes. I just went up, up the scale in weight classes. And so it got to a point where the symptoms were getting hard to ignore. I don't think I mentioned though. Earlier on in life, I was experiencing things like chest pain during exertion, shortness of breath. So, whether or not that was anxiety related or that was related to my metabolic health, I don't
Mm.
know. But the symptoms definitely got worse towards the end of my, I guess, sorry, the later part of my 20s. And, you know, the
Can I?
visits to the G, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
I just had a question about your mental state. So,
Yeah,
you said you kind of gave up on the food thing and you just focused on strength.
yes,
And did you ever have a moment or many moments of, well, I'm young, it must be genetic, it's just the way it is, and I can't do anything
yes,
about it. I'm just going to keep working out to keep my heart
yeah,
healthy or whatever, because you were really young. And I can imagine that might have been really hard to hear over and over again. It's like, well,
yeah,
I've been working out, I've been dieting. Like, apparently, my health is not meant to be, right?
yeah. Hmm. I think um, it it definitely. I think it was more of an. I wouldn't say it was a hard thought at that time. I think I'll lead up to that point where I just decided to. Well, I guess when things went downhill rapidly, um, we, I will say it was the year before COVID hit. This was in 2019. I was in my late 20s, and the symptoms started to get really terrible to a point where I needed to call the ambulance, after gym sessions because of chest pain. I had to call, the ambulance to come pick me up at home at midnight because of chest pain. That's when it really started to trickle into my mind. I think what I'm trying to say was, I was in denial at the time of, hey, I didn't want to accept that this was my fate, that genetics were the issue. But because of the circumstances of me ending up in hospital and me having to be referred to specialist cardiologists before I hit 30, that's when I think you mentioned, in my bio, the anxiety and depression kicked in. That's when I truly felt I was depressed. And that's when I I just succumbed to the notion that this is all genetics. This is my fate. And from there, um, I decided to just docs. I tried with diet and lifestyle. Write me up the prescriptions now. Like I'm done trying my hardest. I think this is where life is going to go. And at that time, I'm a young father with my first born at the time. I'm navigating life, and
And
it was scary.
you were a
Yeah,
nurse too at that point?
I was a nurse. Yes. So, you know, I decided to just go along the path of what I knew to be the direction that most people need to take at the time. It was medications. So I got on the statins, I got on the beta blockers, I got on the blood pressure medications, um, and other medications too for pain. I had a lot of joint pain as well. So I decided to just take the medications and do my best in diet with diet. Okay, because I physically couldn't exercise in the gym. After seeing my cardiologist, I decided to quit the gym. I said I'm no longer. I don't want to put myself under that stress again. I clearly remember being on the treadmill before my workout and just having this immense, this huge chest pain. And I remember one of the personal trainers having checked my blood pressure. It was through the roof. They called the ambulance and sent me off. So
Wow.
I didn't want to go through that again. So I quit the gym. I said, no, my body can't take it. And with that, you know, um, like I said, that became a huge part of my life. That was my only, I guess, outlet at the time in
Wow.
life.
So
So,
I kind of want to jump forward because I want to know you had some kind of point of no return moments
mhm,
of like, well, you throw your hands in the air. I just got to listen to the doctors and this is my lot in life. So between then and now, when was the next transformation? When was the
right.
aha moment of, wait a minute, there's
Yeah.
another option here?
Yeah. So uh, the aha moment came in 2020 when the world was in the midst of the COVID pandemic and all the hoo-ha around that. I had time in my hand to do some research and to start digging into what was going on because I knew the buzzwords, I knew inflammation. I knew all this, and I thought, well, let's actually just take our time with this and learn about it. And so that's when I guess I started to open my eyes around what was going on in social media. Now, I had a colleague at the time who was raving on about this ketogenic diet, and honestly, it was just red flags. I'm like, no hell, no way am I doing this high fat, low carb diet. Number one, I cannot give up my carbohydrates. That's just it's a non-negotiable. And number two, you know, my I guess traditional sense of healthcare, my red flags were kicking in my brain saying, don't do this. You're gonna just skyrocket your cholesterol. Like, okay. Uh, I'll look into it anyway because this colleague of mine, he was so persistent. And he sounded so passionate about it. He sent me through a documentary by Dr. Robert Lustig. It was Sugar the Bitter Truth. That changed that opened my eyes a lot. And so I I was hesitant to give it a go, but this is, my I don't know how life works, but somehow this was the moment. This is the moment I decided to say I'm doing something about it. I was taking a nap with my wife and my newborn son, and I woke up out of breath, and my wife was just looking at me. She was looking at me saying, you stopped breathing a couple of times. And so I thought, oh no, don't tell me I've got sleep apnea. And so that I don't know what it was, but my thought at the time was, if I'm struggling while I'm awake, I'm struggling in life with these symptoms, with my health, and I can't even catch a break when I'm asleep. No, I've got to do something about it. No, I'm done. I'm done with trying you know, just trying the things that I've known to be healthy, and I'm just gonna try this keto thing because what have I got to lose right now? And so I tried keto,
So
and
if
that
real
worked.
quick, if Dr. Fumi were here, she would say
Yeah,
her famous quote, if you want something to change that you've never experienced before, you have to do something that you've never done before,
yeah,
right? Because if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, we all know what
mm,
that is, folks.
yeah,
So, yeah, good for you.
yeah. And that's exactly what I did. I just went for it. I just did something different, and it was scary. Red flags were still there. I was always, worried about cholesterol. I was always worried about, well, this is just gonna send me into the ED again. But after a week or two, it didn't. Nothing happened. I actually lost weight, and
How did you feel? Because a lot of
I,
people, they avoid going into ketosis or trying the ketogenic dietary pattern
yeah,
because of the whole keto flu thing, which I don't even think that's a thing. They shouldn't call it a keto flu. They should call it the sugar
yeah,
flu
yeah.
because your body is
Oh,
detoxifying from refined carbohydrates, and there's a way to calm that reaction if you do
mhm.
it gradually, and later we'll talk about your protocol.
I
But
like that.
um
Yes.
yeah, so did how did you do it for 2 weeks? Did you just cold turkey, like stop
Nope.
eating carbs, or was it a transition?
It was definitely a transition. I think, and that was before I even learned about what I know now. I think psychologically, I just wasn't prepared for it to make a big leap that everyone says they just did. Oh, they cut all the carbs cold turkey, or they went under 50 grams. No, that could not happen with me. So it did start with, let's try a day or two of strict keto, and it backfires because I'd want to have the carbohydrates. I'm actually, I should. This is the first time I've actually told people how um, I overcome a lot of my sugar addiction. But this was my mindset, or this is, I guess, how I did it. I set myself a time frame. Like I give myself the expectation of, okay, I'm going to try being strict for a couple of days, or I'm going to try not having rice for just 3 days. And then at the end of the 3 days, I'm going to go all in and just indulge. Because, and psychologically, I think that worked for me because after I would indulge, I'd feel terrible. And so it was sort of reverse engineering my brain to think, oh, well, binging hurts your stomach. So it was just interesting. That was my thought process. But I definitely did not go cold turkey, and I think that was the success that I had with being consistent, and me later on transitioning into carnivore, was that I didn't really go through those hard symptoms. The only time I did experience, there were only two moments. Uh, it was when I decided to go carnivore, and maybe Amelia, you could have your own thoughts on this, but I developed this widespread rash all over my torso. Um, and people are telling me that that was the keto flu. I don't know. I'm still
After how
confused as to
long?
what this was. A week into going carnivore.
But you had been keto before that, right?
Yeah,
For a while?
and I had no symptoms at all. No symptoms of the keto flu while I was ketogenic. But that week of going carnivore, I had a torso rash, which lasted a day or two. It wasn't huge.
Could that have been oxalate dumping?
That's my thoughts. That was my thoughts. So that's what I'm sticking with. But people were insisting that it was the keto flu. I remember hopping onto threads online and going, "Help, guys! I've got this rash. What do I do?" And people were saying, it's probably the keto flu. So it eventually went away. But
Yeah, I don't know
I
if
do
I've
think it
heard
was
about.
oxalate dumping.
Yeah, I haven't heard the keto flu producing a rash. Who knows? Everybody's different. But you had already cut out a significant amount of carbohydrates and
Yeah.
you were not binging at that point? Or were you
Um.
still having every few days carbs?
Oh yeah, I think so. Leading up to carnivore, it definitely the period between um, binging and being consistent with keto uh, expanded. So it started off, a couple of days, maybe let's say Monday to Friday, I was keto. On the weekends, I would have rice and desserts and whatnot, and that would expand the longer I guess you could say I stayed fat adapted. I just felt a lot better when I didn't eat carbohydrates. Every time I did, I'd say, "Oh, this feels ugh." So I would just
And you mean
postpone my
physiologically, not just mentally,
yeah.
like emotionally, like physically. What were your symptoms that you identified as, not feeling good?
The main one was definitely the energy, and I would say just gut upset. Not necessarily major symptoms, but every time I would do so well, I would have a good streak of being keto, and I ended off with a I'll have some carbs. It just really upset my system generally,
Mm-hmm.
fatigue, the gut symptoms, um, but and that mentally, told me, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Let's just be consistent and try going for longer periods. So weeks of being consistent became months. And every time I would and the thing was, every time I did binge, the symptoms would get worse. So people say it's a bit of a curse that now that you're consistent, you can't go back into eating pleasurable foods. But I say it's a blessing because now my body knows you shouldn't be doing that, and my body is telling my brain, "Oh, don't do that."
You have a clear uh, communication signal, or you have a
Yeah.
clear telephone line, or a clear road. No obstructions, no distractions, right? It's very, very clear now, and I can relate to that. I won't go into too much detail, but the other day I had some sugar for a dessert at
Mm.
an event, and it was, I swear, this big. The next day, I woke
Oh.
up wanting to slay everything. Like, and I'm thinking, what is going on? Like, what time of the month is it? And am I dehydrated? Did I not sleep well? Did I have
Mm.
nightmares? And then I, of course, asked that question. What did you eat yesterday, Amelia?
Mm.
And it was a small amount of a dessert that just triggered my body. And my number one symptom was irritability. And it was not okay. It was not just a little irritable. I was raging. And luckily, no one else was around. But yeah, I have this blessing now. I don't call
Mm.
it a curse anymore. I used to get bummed out about it. Like, oh, can't even indulge, at my
Yeah.
friend's birthday or on Christmas or anything. Like I always have to just say, no, I can't. No, thanks. No, thanks. But now I'm like, I'm cool. I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
going to go home and have a brown butter bite or, eat my own dessert that I made with a bunch of yummy things that won't
Yeah.
trigger me. Right. So I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
glad that you see that as a blessing now too. We all had to go through that process of
Yeah. Yeah.
coming to terms with it and calling it something else. Like it's a benefit, right?
Yeah.
It's not about suffering. It's a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, that is my clear definition of what food freedom is. It's when you've actually, I guess your attitude has changed towards food. And I think to me that is food freedom, because I had this really interesting thing the other day. Someone asked me, look, I've seen some of your older posts, and you talk about food freedom. What does that mean? I'm like, oh, geez. Okay, now I've got to read. I've got to define. And I think that to me is when I think a lot of people achieve that food freedom, when it's no longer a pleasure to you. You eat because you need it to sustain and to fuel your life, to fuel your daily life, to feel good, and you're not eating it for pleasure anymore. And so that I think was that is an underrated benefit that you achieve when you go down the path of I'm not even going to say carnivore. I'll say all low carb diets. I've seen people sustain low carb diets for a very long time and know, I guess, that are a lot better at moderating than I am, but that understand that when you do slip up and you have these moments, it's not a good thing, and that's your body telling you, yeah, it's a good signal to have. Um,
Right. Yeah.
mm, mm. But
So that also kind of got me thinking, see if I can stay with my train of thought. Um so I had a client say to me something like that once where they said, I just have to get to the point where food is not about pleasure. I can't expect to enjoy food. And I said, hold on, wait, okay, I get it because the pleasure was coming for a void, maybe for coming to fill a need that wasn't being met emotionally, right? So I get that we don't want to eat food to fill these places of sadness or depression or anxiety. However, I want to enjoy my food. I want to look forward to eating. And it's been a long journey, and I'm sure you can attest to this, where I've come to a place where I look forward to my steak and butter. I still eat vegetables. I look forward to some steamed broccoli or green beans. And it's so good. It's better than it ever has been. And it just took time for me to have a different mindset, I think. And also my palate had to change over the years. My taste buds had to transform. My whole body had to reset into a
mhm,
new normal. And
mhm.
so I just wanted to also share for our audience, please don't take this conversation as though we don't want you to enjoy your food. Like,
Mhm.
one thing that I tell my clients is don't ever eat stuff that you don't like, even if it's healthy for you, because that's a dead end road. That is going to drive you nuts, and then eventually you're going to lose, momentum. So it's really important to find, as we're making these changes, right, to find the foods that we do value, that not only make us excited to eat it, but make our bodies and our minds feel good after we eat it. And it
Yeah.
can be a little challenging, but don't ever think that being healthy has to be tasteless, has to be boring, has to be, yuck. Because I never tell anyone to eat food that they don't like, because that would be a terrible, terrible way to coach someone, or to train
Yeah.
someone. It's like, oh well, avocados are so good for you. You need to eat them 3 times a day. Just choke them down, bro.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Yeah.
if you don't love avocados, fine, give them to me because I'll eat them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, and I think that a redefinition of pleasure is what people are going to have to. It's what people have to do in order to, I guess, move past a lot of the attachments that you had with food. That's my experience anyway. I did have to do a lot of redefinition. My sense of enjoyment with what I eat now on the carnivore diet is it's a different kind of pleasure. It's not that same excitement that I'd get when I'd eat a Big Mac or I would down a slushy. It's a different type of pleasure. It's hard to explain. It really is, and
I
I
get
like these
it. Yeah.
points that you're bringing up. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
maybe we could go into replacement
yeah.
because I really want to touch on culture because one of
Hmm.
my values in all the work that I do is always addressing the mind, body, and culture of our
Hmm.
metabolic health. So how do you talk about, you know, cultural food traditions with your friends and family and say, "Hey, I'm not going to bring rice to the party, but I'm going to bring this." And it might be somewhat culturally similar, but how do you have those conversations? Or, when people offer you food and you have to turn it down and they're like, "Hey man, it's the holiday, like you got to have this." So I personally enjoyed, because I love to cook, but not all people do, enjoyed finding modifications, replacements, because I don't want to just not eat. And I don't want anyone else
Hmm.
to feel like, oh, just you can't eat anything on a holiday because it's all crap. Well, what are you bringing to the table, Joff? What are you trying? What are you modifying to also, continue important traditions with your family?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So I'm not going to lie and say that it was all smooth sailing when it comes to trying to have conversations with your family and friends, but the initial stages were challenging, and I think I did a lot of avoiding at first. I did avoid a lot of these conversations with people. They could physically see. So, just going back a bit with when I went carnivore, that's when things totally changed. I went on the carnivore diet, um, and my life turned around, and people could see it. People could physically see the weight coming off. So I'll just sum it up real quick with carnivore journey. I initially just wanted to try it for a few months, and that ended up being a year of doing carnivore. It was so easy for me to do. It was just I'm a simple guy. It made sense. I lost about 40 kilos, so that's 88 pounds, I believe. And all my symptoms that I experienced, with the heart disease stuff, that was gone. Um, I got off all my medications. All my metabolic issues seem to have disappeared, and life was just better. So that's where things were in that span of a year. I felt like a new person, and the biggest change was my mental health. I was no longer this anxious um, downer. I just had this pep in my step. I just felt like I could take on the world. And so people physically saw the difference, but they also noticed mentally. I don't know, I was just over the moon. And the biggest thing for me was going out to these outings or these events with my family. The conversation would have to come up, and so I will talk about. I'm an open book. I will tell them what I'm doing, and it's a pattern interrupt, because it's like, wait, what? You don't eat vegetable? Wait, what? You don't eat rice? wait, what about your cholesterol, and what about, this? And so the way I had to navigate around it, I felt like I had to base it on my experience and my experience alone. I did not want to sound like the expert, because I am not. And to this day, I'm still not an expert. I'm an expert on myself. So I'll tell people my experiences. So when I will just give some examples, with Filipinos, they've got this whole they've got a mantra, rice is life. That's it. You have to have rice in every meal. And a lot of the uncles and aunties would be like, "Oh, I can't give up rice. It's life. I couldn't do that." And I would just tell them how amazing I felt, and I would, I guess, take a page from social media, where you have to be a bit outrageous and make it sound really exaggerated. But I would tell them, "Oh, I feel like the superhuman, and watch this person here. She's eating a stick of butter, and she looks great, and things like that." And I would do it in a way just to, I guess, try to stick into the positive side of things, because the minute you go down into the rabbit hole of trying to debate people, you're not going to change their mind. It just doesn't work for me anyway. So it was always based on my experience, what I
Mhm.
experienced. And so um, what I brought to the table at parties and events, I would, because, okay, in my family dynamic, in my household, I'm the cook. I'm the chef. So there's no, my family are, I've got my wife and my kids. They eat what I eat. I cook for them too. They still eat. They still eat. They're not carnivores. They're definitely more on the low carb spectrum. But when it comes to parties, I'm not holding back. I'm cooking what I'm eating at home. So I make a mean brisket,
Ooh.
and that's what I'm bringing, and the family love it. They can eat it with whatever they're eating. If they have it with rice, spaghetti, whatever it is, you can do whatever you want. But I'm bringing my food, and so that I have something to eat as well. And the family knew me for it. Okay, I'm sorry that I'm rambling here, but
No, it's
I
okay.
really want to make this.
Yeah, that's an example, right? You bring food that you love, and most
Yeah,
people, it sounds like, in your family also love. They just add other stuff to it, and that's fine. That works.
and so. Yeah, yeah. I really want to highlight this, because I think this is where people, I get a lot of people ask, well, how do you do it? How do you, I want my family members to be healthier. I want them to try keto. I want them to just at least cut out rice or carbs. How do you do it? How do you have these conversations? Okay, so when I started, it was just me. It was me and my friend who introduced the keto diet. It was just me and him. In my workplace, we had these two nurses talking about keto and carnivore. I can tell you now, there's at least 20 of us in the hospital, or more, that are doing carnivore. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying I didn't, I wasn't the expert. I just told them my experience. I would just talk to them about, or they'll ask me about, well, they'll ask me questions, and I'll just be upfront and honest about it. I talk about it with my patients if they bring it up, but I don't ever lecture them and tell them, you have to do what I do. No, I'm just sharing to you what's happened with me, and you can do whatever you want with it. That's leading by example. And that is how I broke through the cultural barriers, and the attitudes that people have with food. Um, I've had doctors, junior doctors, come to me, ask me about, well, can you tell me a little bit more about ketosis? I'm like, oh, dude, I'm not the expert. You can do the research yourself, but I feel great when I'm in ketosis. So, you know, maybe that's something you look into yourself, and I'll point you to the things that I've been watching on YouTube, and they do that. It's really interesting.
Curious, how often do you test your ketones?
Okay, 5 years into it,
Oh,
I'm not. I'm
yeah,
definitely
okay.
not. But
Yeah.
but when I first started, I was checking it all the time. I was so excited. Oh my gosh, I'm in ketosis, and I'd go show the doctors, look, ketosis.
Yeah, that's
Um,
something I found too is very different now. I didn't really know about checking ketones back
yeah.
then, when I first sort of explored low carb and stuff. So I wasn't like you where I was doing it all the time. And then years later, I finally got a keto mojo, and
Mm,
it is really hard for me to get into ketosis. Well, not really hard. I have to fast.
yeah.
Even if I'm
Yeah.
eating 80% fat and 20% protein,
Mm,
I usually have to fast at least 18 hours to get into mild ketosis.
yeah. Yeah.
And so I was just curious if you test regularly, but for a lot of folks who've been doing this for multiple years consistently, you're already in fat burning mode. And I don't know the science, I
Mm,
can't get into it,
yeah.
but there's a lot of criticism out there. Oh, well, you're not in ketosis and you're not keto, and
Yeah.
but all the keto people and all the really the big experts, right, are like,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Your labs are good. You feel good.
Yeah.
You're burning fat. It's okay. Don't obsess about getting into ketosis all the time. And, you know,
Yeah.
that whole thing.
Yeah, I think it becomes a norm, that feeling of, when your body is switched into this gear, like, you know, for me, I think I do have to be this. I think I'm the same as you. I do need to fast to get into I guess the more mild to moderate levels of ketosis. But nowadays, I think my body tells me, uh, oh man, you just feel this hit of energy, and it really helps when you're a nurse too, because I do shift work. So I don't eat when I'm at work, even no matter how busy and how stressed out that is, how stressed out I am. I just don't, and I feel amazing. I feel
Right.
great. And so people are like, and that's also the conversation starter for a lot of people. I'm here, on my break, I'm on my phone, and people are looking at me, what are you doing? Like, where's your food?
I'm not
Well,
hungry.
let me tell you
Yeah.
about, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is really important to talk a little bit about for folks who haven't tried, a keto dietary lifestyle or carnivore dietary lifestyle. It's not about eating. The goal isn't to starve yourself, right? The goal is not to not enjoy food, right? We covered that already. It's about changing your physiology. It's it's upgrading, it's revolutionizing your mitochondrial function,
Hmm.
and if you're not hungry after 5 hours and you're not experiencing any bad symptoms like fatigue or dizziness or nausea or headaches, then there's not anything wrong. And if you're doing it consistently and you're not getting these symptoms that are usually associated with dieting, right, are usually associated with calorie restriction because you are missing vital minerals or nutrients chronically. It's different here because when we're eating that steak or we're eating that high protein, high fat meal, our body is getting saturated with bioavailable, nutrient dense macronutrients, right? And so it's like premium fuel, right? We can ride that wave, we can coast down that highway without even trying because our body's getting the best food that it needs for us, right? And so I just wanted to kind of comment about that is you're not starving yourself, you're not, you know, anorexic, you're not binging, you're good. And it's amazing to hear this. And also I love that you're sharing that reality because people see it at work and you can't really not talk about it, but the way you do is great. You know, it's you are the expert of yourself, and that's what I always tell my clients is I only know so much, but you're the one. You're the one who knows what works and doesn't work for your body. And it's just a matter of getting below the surface, right? Getting through the layers of muck that have built up over the years, eating crap, right? And eventually it's just a straight shot, right? You don't even
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
try anymore. It's it's great to hear, Joff.
yeah. Thank you, thank you. Yeah. Um, uh, on that last point about um, you know, the influence you have with people, it trickles down, not just with, it does, it's a trickle down effect. Like I said, it was, there's about 20 odd people now that I know have tried keto or carnivore in the workplace, but they tell their friends and they tell their families, their kids go on the diets. That to me has been the most fulfilling part of my journey. And that's what sort of inspired me to go down this pathway to become a health coach. Because well, to keep it short, I don't want to see people ending up in my ward. I'd hate to see the loved ones, that I care so deeply about end up in the hospital system where I know, I'm just going to be honest about it. It's not getting better, Amelia. It's getting worse, and the metabolic health of our general population is it's not looking good. It's not. It really isn't. And like, I'll just give you a quick snapshot. When I started nursing, I'd maybe, let's say I'd have 10 patients to look after. Maybe there was two of them that were type 2 diabetics, maybe three of them. Maybe one of them was on insulin. In my last few shifts, all of my patients, all 10 of them were type 2 diabetics. All of them had a type 2 diagnosis. About five or six of them were on insulin.
And they were all there for different reasons though.
All there for different reasons. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, most of them are on multiple medications. About three or four of them won't have limbs. They've had them amputated. It's putting such a strain on I'm not just going to say the nurses, but the healthcare system, that I just felt obliged that I have to talk about metabolic health with my peers, and I have to go on social media. So look, why not go into the route of becoming a health coach to try and see if people can be inspired to make lifestyle and diet changes that maybe I have gone through myself. And if you relate to my story, I'd love to help and guide you through it, because, I can only speak on my experiences. I've been there, and, let's see where it goes. And, that's really been the next wave in my life. And it's, as you can call it, a passion project, being a health coach. And it's an absolute ball. I love it.
Yeah, me too. I didn't really think I was going to become a health coach. I originally just became a personal trainer as my sort of foundation. And
Yeah.
because I knew I didn't want to go do like nutritionist or dietitian or medical route.
Yeah.
So, based off of the population and the demand, that's pretty much how I got here. Is my clients
Yeah.
were coming to me to work out and get in shape, and then after the first hour free consultation, 9 times out of 10, they're like, "Oh, I think I have a food issue. We should probably talk about that."
Yeah.
Because they knew if they went to the gym, it wasn't going to help enough if they were
Mm.
still eating, ultra processed foods all the time. One thing I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned Australia, there's an interesting article that I have linked on my website under my blog section, but I'll share it in the show notes. It's a summary of chronically ill countries, and it was from 2023. And there's a whole section on how does Australia compare. And on this chart, Australia is 25th third out of the top chronically ill countries. Guess who's number one?
Oh, who's got
The United States of America. But even though if you look at this list, which is 46 countries deep, Australia, you would think, oh, 25, that's 23, that's not bad. But then you look at the percentages of mental health, diabetes prevalence, CVD, asthma, all these other things, and it's not great. However, you are participating in the transformation of this, Joff. So I just wanted to share that you acknowledge this trouble, right? And you're walking the talk. You are not only a medical professional, trained, certified nurse, but you've gone out of your way when you didn't have to, right? To learn more about metabolic health, to serve your clients and your patients better. So Australia can shift their placement on that chart, right? And I don't know, man, US, we're number one. That's what they always say.
Yes, number one for you. Number one for
We
everything.
got a long ways to go, but I have interviewed so many doctors and talked with so many doctors, and my favorite ones, of course, are the ones saying we need more health coaches. We need more personal trainers because the doctor cannot do it all, and they only see their patient once or twice a year, maybe a few more if they have a serious condition. But I'm always very appreciative of that because the doctors believe in us. They really do. And you said there are doctors coming up, younger doctors than you, coming up to you and asking you for nutrition education, asking you for, research materials and science-based facts
Yeah,
about helping
yeah,
people. So that's great. That's amazing that you have been part of a transformation of culture at work as well, not just personal, or familial, but I think work that's a beast to try
yeah.
because there are people who have almost lost their licenses to to practice. Who's the guy? Do you know, is his name Gary?
Gary Fettke? Yeah,
Yes, Gary Fettke. I
yeah.
will drop a link about him, but can you tell us a little bit about him and his kind of legacy?
Look, I don't know the particulars. All I know is he was struck off the medical board, the board that gives the doctors their registration here in Australia. I don't know the story, to be honest.
Okay,
It's been a while since I've actually watched any of it. I haven't seen any of his YouTube videos in a long time.
me
But there's
too.
another doctor um, in South Africa with the same story, Dr.
Tim
Tim
Noakes.
Noakes.
Yeah, I'm much more
I
familiar
know,
with Tim. Yeah.
yes, yeah, but they're both very similar sort of predicaments where they were struck off the board, but were able to get back on after years and years of, um, you know, I guess defending their case. I honestly I want to give hats off to all of them because there's it's not just them two. I know people. I should say I know people in places that have also had that issue and
Yeah.
doctors. Yeah, and
And
it's hard.
essentially, all they were doing was say, stop eating so much ultra processed food and eat real food, whole food.
Hmm.
That's all they were saying. But because of the words they chose and the words that got
Yeah,
transformed in the telephone game, it was suddenly a lawsuit and suddenly malpractice. And
yeah,
yeah, so I'll put some information, some links about Gary Fettke and Tim Noakes so people can learn more about their revolutionary work, quite
yeah,
literally, the
yeah,
sacrifices that they've made to help people and practitioners, healthcare practitioners, improve, their jobs, the work that they do, but of course, help patients better,
yeah,
and
yeah,
create sustainable solutions. So we're at an hour 19. And this has
I knew
been
it.
a very easy conversation. But before we wrap up, was there anything else that you wanted to finish before I kind of interrupted you? Did you want to?
No,
Okay.
no.
Because I do have one more question for you. And maybe you've already said it, but we always like to close out with a piece of, I don't want to say advice because we don't give medical advice. But the question is, what is a magical metabolic tip that you would like to offer our audience? Whether it's a magical sort of thing that you never thought would be so powerful in your life, or it could be personal or professional. But we say magical because, as you know, transforming your life through food, just that one thing, is oftentimes unbelievable. It's like magic. And that's why we call ourselves the magic of metabolic health, because it will transform your life and many others around you if you welcome it, right? So what's your magical metabolic tip, Joff?
Hmm. Let me think. There's so many. Okay, and this is generally for everyone. Whether you are on the fence uh, on starting any sort of lifestyle change, I think the biggest tip would be to question, to always question what you already know. Because if you don't question, then how do you move forward to find the answers? Because and that's with anything really. Um, I started with asking the question: Is am I going to die if I go keto because of the fat in the diet? And so that prompted me to look into it to try and find the answer, to try and find the answers. It's I think we've been so conditioned and so, I guess, I don't want to say
Brainwashed?
indoctrinated, brainwashed,
Indoctrinated? Hey,
indoctrinated. Yeah, hey,
follow the
but
money.
we've been taught, I guess, we've been so driven to think a certain way for such a long time. And I know how hard it is to break out of that pattern, you know, but it's never too late. So just ask questions.
I love
And
that.
I don't want to say be open-minded. I think we need to be critical, and we need to start really taking that autonomy and control in our lives to know what we're doing to ourselves. Because for a long time, I'm sure those who are watching, you haven't had that control. You've just followed. And yeah, that is my message.
I love it. Thank you. So we didn't get to go into your protocol. However, I know that you have lots of social media, you have a website, and health coach Joff has a fabulous free PDF packet that you can get if you want to transition. It's specifically into carnivore, right?
Yes, yes,
So
correct.
tell
Yes.
us how to get that, and I can put that in the show notes as well. But tell us how do we get that information?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can basically just follow me on social media, and I am most active on Instagram. And the beauty of Instagram is when you do follow, I automatically send a message to you to tell you where you can get it. So that's all
Nice.
you've got to do is just follow my Instagram. It's under Health Coach Joff. Now I'm also on other platforms. I'm on YouTube and on Facebook. It's all under the same handle, Health Coach Joff. It's universal in social media. So that's how you can access the protocol. That's how you can access, I guess, coaching inquiries. And, I've got a bunch of resources that people can have a look at. Um, and Instagram is where I'm normally most active. So
Great. Yeah, me too. That's where we found each other.
Yes.
somewhere on some thread
Yeah.
somehow. Well, before we wrap up, I always like to remind folks that if you're inspired by what you saw or heard today, the fastest and easiest and most affordable step is to start making changes with your dietary pattern. And I know it can be really confusing on which way to go, what to eat, what not to eat. And so what I recommend is for you to get a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. It's a 2-week device and it tracks your blood sugar, technically your interstitial fluid, but it tracks your blood sugar 24/7. You don't ever have to prick your finger. And it is absolutely just mind-blowing to
Yes.
have that on after you eat every meal. It'll tell you exactly what your blood sugar is doing. And it's really informative. And so we have a partnership with Lingo, which is one of the CGM companies out there. If you go to hellolingo.com and you check out for one of the CGMs, put in our discount code Metabolic Magic, all one word, and you will get a fancy discount. And if that intimidates you, I also offer a 2-week CGM coaching program. It's called the Blood Sugar Shakedown, and I will put that in our show notes as well. But please, folks, like, we're a village, right? We got you. So please make a comment. We want to hear your story as well. And I'm so grateful, Joff, for you taking the time out of your day to visit here at the Magic of Metabolic Health. And I know we'll stay in touch. And man, when are you going to organize the next low carb down under? Because I want to
Oh,
go. I want
you
to
do?
go.
Oh. I've
Yeah.
actually never been to one. I've never been to one. Um,
Yeah.
and
Those.
yeah, it looks so amazing. I honestly, there was one last year which was, and I'm kicking myself for it because it was in my city. It would, a good 20-minute drive, and I could have gone, but
It's for
I had
me.
other commitments. Yeah,
Yeah. I know.
yeah.
It's
I had all
hard.
my heroes there. Everyone, they were all
Right?
there.
I
Yeah.
know. And they're spreading. They're spreading all over the world.
Yeah.
They have them in the UK now pretty regularly. Switzerland had
Yeah.
one. The US has several a year. So
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
be at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Antonio. Let's see. 20, is that this year or next year? San Antonio, low carb. I'll tell you the date right now. So anyone who wants to go, it's 2027. It's January 2027 in the beautiful city of San Antonio, Texas. So if you've never been, Joff, we could meet there.
That could be it. Could be it. Oh, look, that San Antonio. That sounds far away for me, but
It is really far
I
away.
could make a trip.
It's far for me, but you win.
Yeah.
You'll be the person who traveled the furthest to get there. But yeah, they already
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
some confirmed speakers and tentative lineup already on their website. That's the lowcarbusa.org for anybody who's in the Texas area or who just wants to go to San Antonio for all the awesome food. Okay, so what else do we got? We gave you the discount code. Joff, got anything else to say?
No, no, I'm good, thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much, Amelia, for this. It has been wonderful to create these memories and to actually have a face-to-face conversation. And just extend my regards as well to Dr. Funmi for also accommodating. And I do wish that this isn't the last of our conversations. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
For sure. Yeah, maybe we can do a live Q&A sometime.
Oh,
That would be
yeah,
fun.
sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, cool.
definitely.
All right, folks. Well, thank you for being here. My name is Amelia, and we are the Magic of Metabolic Health. Thank you for being part of our village, and we will see you next time.
We're bringing healthy back. Them other bros don't know about the facts.